This is a side note about senior living in Wichita, Kansas. There are hundreds of options in Wichita, Kansas that range in price and care and whatever your needs may be. So you are encouraged to do your homework, especially while you are able. Go visit, ask whether they have a down payment or not, what their rent is going to be. Think ahead about where you might want to live and what your price range will be so that you can get the care that you most need at the right time in your senior years. Everybody has their personal preference, and so that's why I encourage you to go by yourself or go with your family members and have a look around, and make sure that you don't go during one of their special senior luncheons. They have everything prepared to make it seem like it's slick, their food is great, and everything that they have to operate to your needs. If you walk in unannounced and ask to be shown around and they are not willing to show you around, that might be a red flag. If you go in unannounced and they're happy to take you on a tour, that's probably someplace that's prepared to take care of you whenever you have a need. Remember, there are usually 4 stages of need. There's independent living, there's assisted living, there's memory care, and then there's also senior nursing care, full-time nursing care. You will also have probably a stay in a rehab somewhere if you have been in the hospital. And there are 2 types of that going on. You can either have a very hardcore rehab where you have to go 3 hours a day for physical therapy and be able to handle that 3 hours for Medicare to pay. Or you may just need something where they help you get around for a few weeks until you can get on your own feet. So keep in mind, know your options. There are so many of them, and you are your own best advocate. We'll go ahead and move on into our evening this evening. This evening it's Russell Hall who has agreed to join us. Again, we don't promote any certain person here at Asbury, but Russell goes to Asbury and he was happy to join us this evening, and so we appreciate him giving of his time and his knowledge to us so that we can better make our decisions. I know I've had a few people who are like, well, I don't need to go to these things because, God will take care of me. And I agree with that 100%, He will. But He also helps those that help themselves with the knowledge that they need to be taken care of well and to know what your needs are, what your wishes are. Remember, so much of what we talked about at the very beginning is subjective to you personally. What does life mean to you? What is quality of life to you? And that's between you and God. So I'm so thankful that you all have come out and asked such fantastic questions and been such a great bunch to work with. So thank you. So before Russell comes up, let's go before the Lord and pray. Father God, we are so very thankful that you do have it worked out. You knew from the day before we were born what our senior living was going to look like. And so we ask for your wisdom as we go through these sessions and the things that we've learned, that you would give us great knowledge of how to help you take care of us while our lives are on this earth. Lord, just be with Russell tonight. Help our questions to be ones that are fruitful for all of us, Lord. And thank you for loving us so much that you've given us a church home where we can do these things for each other and be honest with each other and find out what we need to know. So just go before us. May your Holy Spirit be abundant among us tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Well, I forgot to draw something on this whiteboard here. And I don't want you to think I'm trying to recreate the War of the Worlds or anything, in case you saw that movie, but I need that to be right there for a moment. Okay, I'm Russell Hall. I'm sure you all know who I am. I'm getting a little feedback. Is that going to be a problem? Okay. I've been in the financial services business for 34 years plus, and since 1989 I've been a certified financial planner designee. So I've been doing this a long time. Most people would think, well, if he's been doing it a long time, then he probably is a real expert and knows a lot of stuff. But it seems like the longer I am in this profession, the more that I learn I don't know. And the more I realize, how many of you remember good old Donald Rumsfeld? There was a press conference that he was giving one time, and somebody was asking him to give them predictions about the future, and I don't even know what the subject was, but he made a famous quote, and I've used it probably hundreds of times, but he said, look, he says, we have three kinds of information. He says, we have the known knowns. Those are the things we know, and we know we know. And then he says, we have the known unknowns. Those are the things we don't know, but at least we know we don't know them. But he says, then we have the unknown unknowns. Those are the things we don't know, and we don't even know we don't know. And those are the things that come and get us. As I get older in the profession, seems like my unknown unknowns get bigger and bigger. But I'll try to share with you what I, a little bit of what I do know. I want to focus tonight in this brief time on retirement investing, focused on producing income during retirement, because the world of investing and financial planning and everything is so broad. There's simply not enough time to cover more than just one approach. Now, I may regret saying this, but people come up to me and say, how much money should I have when I retire? How much money? All you can. That's right, all you can get. But my standard answer for here in Wichita, Kansas, if you're going to retire here in Wichita, Kansas, is I say if you have no debt, that if you have $1 million, you're fine. You're fine. If you have $500,000, you're probably okay. Amounts less than that, then it depends on what other sources of retirement income you have. But those are kind of the far outer limits, and of course above all that, fun and games, huh? But there's an old approach to financial or to retirement, the financial side of retirement, that we refer to as the three-legged stool. And that there is the sum total of my art capabilities. And it used to be, probably the first half of the 20th century, that there were three components. And actually, it'd be more like the middle 50 years of the 20th century, because Social Security wasn't around until the Roosevelt administration. But people had Social Security, and they had a pension, usually. This is all ideal, because I realize not everybody had that. And then over here, they had their own savings. I'll just put save and investments. And we we'd refer to this, of course I wasn't operating during all those years, but we'd refer to this as the stability of the three-legged stool. If you had these three components, your retirement would be good and steady because you had three good sources of retirement income. May I ask who in here who is still, who in here who's still working has a pension? I mean, okay. Okay, most people have some sort of retirement plan, like a 401k or a 403b or something like that. But I'm talking about the classic pension where, okay, John does. You work so many years, and at the end of your, when you retire, then based on how much you were making in your last so many years and your age and all this sort of thing, you got a certain amount per month guaranteed for the rest of your life. in addition to your Social Security and any investments and things you had. Well, those days are drawing to a close rapidly. Companies, the 401k and those type of what we call salary reduction plans have more or less taken over for pension plans. So we don't have that middle leg of the stool anymore. And we really need something there. So that is the big question. That, and then what are we going to do in terms of saving and investment? I mean, it is what it is, and you all probably know more than I do about Social Security. And I can remember years ago, many times saying, well, Social Security won't be there whenever I get to the age to retire. It just won't be there. And now I'm counting the days, counting the days for Medicare and counting the days for Social Security. We will get back to those question marks later on. There's two broad approaches to providing your income at retirement. One is if you have enough assets that you can just take the income off of those assets and never touch the principal. There are a lot of people in that position, and a lot of the people I work with are in that position. And it's a great way to be, because they want to leave the bulk of their assets to their kids or their heirs as a legacy. But not everybody has that luxury, and they have to eat into their principal a little bit. And in the business we call that eating your children. But nevertheless, you do what you have to do. And now everything I'm talking about right now assumes that the day you retire, you have no debt. And ideally you have no mortgage either, and own your home, but I realize that's not everybody either. See, I'm talking in generalities, okay? There's these unknown unknowns about you guys that I just don't know. We generally assume right now that they're always saying, they're telling us from on high, well, don't plan on more than a 4% internal rate of return. Don't plan on more than a 4% income to take off of something. I think that's kind of low. Right now, I use 5%. So if I'm trying to help somebody figure out how to plan for their retirement and they've got so many assets and everything, I usually figure in a 5% rate of return, and I try to figure that after any taxes and after inflation. Now, just as an example, if you have $50,000 and you're earning 5% on it, and you start taking $500 a month out of that $50,000, which obviously you're going to be spending your principal as well as the earnings, it's going to last almost 11 years, 130 months. So a lot of times people think, oh, I can't spend any of my principal because it'll all go away. Well, it depends on how much internal rate of return you're getting and how much or not you're invading the principal. But you can take a certain amount of your principal and still be fine, and most people will outlive their assets. I don't think I've ever had a single client who went broke on me before they passed away. Most people, if they've acquired assets to retire on, they usually don't have to burn through all of them. But things can happen. Things can happen that we have no control over. The big enemies of any retirement plan are health care costs and inflation. Now there's other things that can hurt you, but health care costs and inflation are the things that can erode your nest egg faster than anything. I know you've already had people come and talk to you about healthcare costs and such, and I don't know if anyone's talked to you all about inflation. there's a few people in this room that have never experienced inflation like we experienced back in the 70s and 80s. I mean, first of all, there are some people who don't even know what the word inflation means. But they sure don't know what it means to have 15% per year or more inflation. But that can be devastating, and I hope we never have to go through that again. But the idea of loading all your assets into a big pile and then taking money off of them, is nice if you've got enough assets, but there's other ways to plan for your retirement. I've got to look at my cheat sheet here. So there's an approach, and some of you I'm sure have heard of this, and we call it the bucket approach. So you've got this much money, and investable money that you can invest, and you need to draw a certain amount of income. Let's talk about that $500 a month. Let's say you need $500 a month right now to supplement your Social Security, and maybe you have a pension. So we like to look at it, let's put this into, you can use, when I first learned this, it was 5 buckets, and I thought that's unwieldy. So I do 3 buckets, okay? So we have our 3 buckets here, my artwork once again.
Better than your stool.
Yeah, that's true. And I will forego putting bales and all on the buckets. Now this bucket over here is the one that you're actually taking money out of currently. And I always like to make those little dollar signs flowing out of the little money spigot. So you got, and we'll use our $50,000 as an example. So we've got the $50,000 bucket, and we know that this thing's going to last for 130 months if we're getting 5%. So this is our 5-year bucket, and actually this is not the one we're too worried about, internal rate of return, because this thing we're going to keep in savings accounts, CDs, guaranteed things, bank things, because we can't afford to lose this because this is what we're taking money out of for retirement. But, that water level's dropping constantly because these are our monthly $500 coming out of it. So over here, we've got our next bucket. And we load this bucket, in this example, with $39,000. And we figure if we get 5% internal rate of return, this one is going to be worth $50,000 in 5 years. So see, this one is designed, we run out of money in 5 years. This one, in 5 years, will have grown back to $50,000. Notice I'm not taking into account for inflation, of course. And it will replace this one, and it will become the one, we'll tap it, and it'll become the one that starts spending the money out of. So this one, we can invest a little bit more aggressively, but not much, because we've only got 5 years, and in the investment world, 5 years is not long enough to take big chances. So we usually use short-term bonds, and anytime I say bonds, I'm really talking about bond mutual funds or individual bonds, or there's things called ETFs, and I'm sure a lot of you know what that is, but they're like funds. We usually use that, but you could also use long-term CDs, not more than 5 years, obviously. And it all depends on what interest rates you're doing and what you can get on your CDs. But the main thing is you got to get that magic 5% so that it grows to 50 grand, and that's assuming that we have no inflation. Finally, over here, we put all the rest, whatever it is you have. And then this is what, we've got 10 years until we even need to touch this. 10 years is a good length of time. And if you're 65 when you retire, your life expectancy is at least 25 years, if not 30 or more. So let's say you retired at age 65, and so at age 75, by then this bucket's going to have worked its way over, and we have to handle that. But I'm not even putting, pardon my back, I'm not even putting a rate of return on this one, because this is the one, in order to grow this, a lot of people say there's a rule of thumb that you subtract your age from 100, and however much is left is the amount of money you should have in anything that, fluctuates. Bonds, mutual funds, whatever. Everything else should be guaranteed. But I think that's kind of a silly rule, because it forces you to have more and more money in fixed things like CDs and things, and I'm not against that, when you need your money to be growing somewhere and staying ahead of inflation, because inflation will just kill you. And also your health care costs, most likely, if you're not very, very fortunate, are going to be increasing, and that's another reason you need to have some money. You always need to have some money in the game, stock market, bond markets, something where there's risk, because the only way you make really high returns or more than savings returns is by taking risk. So over here, we've got stocks or stock funds, but we can also have real estate. I'm not talking about your house, but there's other ways, REITs, real estate investment trusts, whatever. You can have oil and gas programs and investments, and sometimes they're structured as master limited partnerships. That's what MLPs are. But these are things that over a long enough period of time give you very good returns. But there are also things, you all know about the stock market. There are things that you got to have time to get past the fluctuations, and depending on a person's age, especially a person at retirement, we don't go into the most aggressive types of stocks and things. There's a difference between a lithium miner in Chile that's selling at 50 cents a share and a block of ConocoPhillips that's paying a dividend of about 5% right now, and I'm pretty sure people are going to need gas and oil for a few years longer. Those are two far opposed ends of the spectrum, but they're both stocks. So the kind of stocks and equities and just general investment vehicles that you use are always to be tailored to your stage of life and your needs. All of this assumes that you're beating inflation. I think I've already covered all these, but people are always asking me, well, what's a good investment right now? Usually it's, what's a good stock? But sometimes they'll say, well, what's the best investment right now? Well, I don't know. In my opinion, the best investment is to have a whole lot of different investments so that you've got something that's really doing well and maybe covering for something that's not doing so well, and then maybe everything else falls in between, and the whole portfolio is doing okay. But I like to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, because there are some people out there who will say, there's an advertisement right now that, take my glasses off, my mic might fall off. It talks about, don't lose your money in the Wall Street casino. Have you heard that? Okay. Because this particular person is advertising, they happen to be advertising a thing that we call an equity indexed annuity. And I'm not against equity indexed annuities, and I've happened to have written a few. But it's like a toolbox. You got a toolbox. You have a hammer and a screwdriver, maybe a Phillips screwdriver and a regular screwdriver, a saw, measuring tape, blah, blah, blah. But you don't use the hammer for everything. You don't use the screwdriver for everything. You match the right tool to the job. And you really, if you're going to work on a project, you don't just take one tool and go work on the project. You usually take your whole toolbox, because you don't know what you may encounter. Well, investing is the same way. Different investments are like different tools. I can't think of a single one that's just bad. And I can't think of a single one that's just perfect and good. I like to call it the good, the bad, and the ugly about every investment. And I made a matrix here, but I'm not going to go through all of it, but I'm just going to pick out an example. Let's say real estate, like you buy a rental house. Great way to produce income during your retirement. But you buy a rental house, okay, you get tax breaks, that's good. You get high income, and really you get nice income off of it if it's bought right and managed right. That's good. Now what's bad? Well, you're a landlord. And you get that call at 3 a.m., hot water tank's leaking, or whatever. I mean, that's one example, but that doesn't rule it out, but it is not good. Believe me, I've got lots of clients that are landlords, and the older they get, the more they want to get out of that business. And then you've got the ugly. And the ugly is, well, probably really bad tenants that destroy your property, and the fact that it's extremely illiquid. If you need money fast and you've got to sell that property fast, you're gonna sell it at a fire sale price. So that would be what I would call the ugly about real estate. Every investment is good, bad, and ugly. So they all have a purpose. I mentioned equity indexed annuities, so I'm going to hammer them a little bit because they've been hammering me for the last 20 years. But the way an equity indexed annuity works is you have an annuity, which is kind of like a CD that's issued by an insurance company. Annuities used to be annuities, by the way, and I didn't write it up here. But a fixed annuity, or what we call an immediate annuity, is a great way, talk about using the right tool for the job, it's a great way to produce this steady income right off the bat where you got to have a guaranteed payment every month for 5 years. You can give an insurance company a certain amount of money, and depending on what interest rates are doing at that time, they will guarantee you $500 a month for a total of 60 months, which is 5 years, and then it's all over. A lot of it was your principal, but you never missed a payment. So an immediate annuity this is a good use for that. But that's just a basic fixed annuity. Well, a long time ago, somebody says, hey, what if we start out with the chassis of just a plain old fixed annuity, like a CD or something, but let's, instead of giving people like 5% a year, 2% a year, let's tie it to the stock market. And what we'll do is we'll give people a chance to make a certain amount of money if the stock market goes up. And it could be a lot more than just your basic annuity rates, which right now are like 3 or 4% at the most. But we won't let them, if the market really goes up, I'm the insurance company, we want to keep the bulk of that, because that's how we make our living. So we're going to cap it. We're going to say, well, it can only go up the 6%. So if the market that it's indexed to, if it goes up 25%, you're going to get 6%. But we will guarantee that once you've made whatever you've made during that period of time, you can never lose it plus your original principal. So there's a guarantee there. And if we have a steady stream of up markets, like if you'd have bought one of these, back in 2009, you would have probably hit the cap every year on your earnings, and you'd look pretty good right now. So far what I've described seems pretty reasonable, don't you think? But that's the good. Now let's talk about the bad. Annuities all have what we call surrender charges, because the insurance company has to have your money long enough that they can pay you whatever they're promising to pay you, but still take your money and invest it and make a profit, because that's how it works. And you don't want your insurance company going belly up because they're the ones that are guaranteeing your investment, right? So they're going to have to keep your money a certain amount of years. That can be, the shortest I've ever seen is 4 years. Longest I've ever seen is 20. And the average is usually 7 to 9 years. And during that period of time, if you pull all your money out early, usually you can get 10% of your money with no penalties. But if you pull all that more or all out, you're going to pay a penalty of sometimes up to 9%. So if you pulled out 100 grand, you'd leave 9,000 with the insurance company. And those surrender charges usually go away over time. So the worst is the first year, and then they step down like 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, whatever, and then they go to 0. And from then on, your money's free and clear, and you can leave it there forever if you want. Well, I'd call that the bad because it's kind of illiquid. But here's the ugly. A lot of people are selling this concept, and they're not telling you get part of the market. They just say you can get market performance and never lose a dime. You can get the upside, but you take absolutely no risk. And what they should say is you can get a very limited amount of the upside. And by the way, if the market doesn't go up that year, you won't lose any of your principal, but you won't get anything but 0. But you don't see that on the commercials, do you? By the way, if the market goes down, you don't make a dime. Now that's okay, because as long as I live in a world of full disclosure, so as long as things are disclosed, I don't think that's unreasonable. But it should be spelled out in advance before you ever sign on the line, give anybody your money. And right now, Toto's pulling the curtain back, okay? And the man says, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. I'm going to hold the curtain back just a little longer, and then I'm going to get off of this subject. These are incredibly profitable things for the people in the insurance companies who sell them. And generally speaking, it's not always the case, but generally speaking, you can take the number of years in the surrender charges, however long that period is, let's say 10 years, and subtract a couple of percent from that, and that's the commission that your agent's making. So you put 100 grand into something, and it has a 10-year surrender charge. Your agent, not always, but could be making up to $8,000 for filling out some forms. That ain't bad. If it's fully disclosed to you in advance and it works out and that tool was the right tool for the job, it's not a bad thing. But when it's not disclosed and whenever it's semi, the facts are semi-told, then I think that's ugly. Okay. Curtains closed. That's the end of my rant on that. So remember our three-legged stool? How do we fill in this? How am I on time? Good, because I want to get to questions pretty quickly. So how do I fill this in now? Well, there's a lot of things. I'm going to write in a different color here. Here's one way. Now, I mean, we're laughing, but let's face it. A lot of people are working part-time jobs during retirement, not because they want to, but because they have to. But at least unemployment's low right now, okay? But there's other ways, and there's one that has sometimes investments and money management ideas, they start out in their crude form and they're not particularly good, but then they are refined over the years and they become something that's pretty slick in the good sense of the word. How many of you have seen one of my heroes, Tom Selleck, talking about reverse mortgages? Okay, now this will be my last topic, I guess. One thing I have seen in my 34 plus years in this business is what happens whenever people, they're retired, they age, and sometimes they live in their house for the rest of their life. Maybe the last few weeks or days they go to a hospital and then they're gone. And the house is still there. And a lot of times when that happens, they lived in that house, and as you get older, I'm speaking about myself, as I get older, I'm less inclined to work on the house. I'm less inclined to fix things real quickly before they can get worse. And so I've seen a lot of cases where people, they inherited, siblings, they inherited the house. It turns out the house has got so many things wrong with it that they're going to have to pump a ton of money in it just to get it fit to sell. So the house becomes a burden. Sometimes, unfortunately, people have to leave their house long before they pass away because they have a health situation that they need long-term care. Once again, now the house has gone from being the home, it's gone to being a problem, and they need to sell that house usually. That was my mother's case. We needed to sell her house so that we could raise enough money to supplement her Social Security and all to pay for her long-term care, because my mother passed away a few years ago from complications of Alzheimer's. And believe me, that it's expensive. So Tom Selleck comes out and he talks about, a reverse mortgage. Now, 10 or more years ago, I wouldn't have recommended a reverse mortgage to anybody because they were kind of unknown, and I didn't think they were very good, and most of the reports I got of them, they weren't good. But they've really, through a combination of regulations, the government's come in and regulated them so they can't, as Tom says, take your house. Now, reverse mortgages are a pretty good solution for getting that equity out of your home. Because look, suppose you have a home that's worth $100,000. The only way to get the money out of it is to sell it. Let's say you paid it off, spent your whole life paying it off, and then turn right around and put a mortgage on it, but you still own it and you still are responsible for certain things. But if you're still capable of living there and capable of overseeing the maintenance and everything, why not start gradually taking the income out of that home? And they can't throw you out, and they'll pay you a set amount of money, a monthly amount of money, just like a reverse mortgage payment, until you pass away or until you leave the house, at which time, if there's any equity and value left in that house, once they've sold the house and covered their contractual, what they get, you'll get the balance. So it's a great exit strategy for the family home, I think. And when you pass away, your kids aren't left with this house. They may live. I have one family where 2 kids, one lives in New Hampshire, one lives in Los Angeles. And every time they have to do anything for mom, they have to fly halfway across the country and all. And it was a red letter day whenever they sold the house, let me tell you. They still come and see mom, but now they don't have to come and spend a week working on the house or whatever. So I think one of the ideal ways of filling in this middle leg here is a reverse mortgage. Provided that you own a home, because I realize not everybody owns a home. I have to make so many generalizations talking in here. I hope you forgive me for assuming things that may not be the case about you. Now, before I get into questions, I want to point out there were some handouts there. I don't intend to use any of these tonight. I just wanted you to have them because I thought they were pretty neat. One is this. It's a kind of a cheat sheet for the new tax law, and it has 2 sides. It already has a revision. So where it says special alert, that's the revision to this. And I bet you there'll be more revisions before it's all said and done. But I thought you might kind of want to get a look at some things. I'm not a tax expert, so I think you all had a tax or an accountant or somebody come and talk one time, didn't you? Talk about taxes and such?
No, that wasn't. We had a lawyer and we had Medicare insurance, but
Okay.
that's something we could add to the list for next year.
Well, you don't want to get all your tax advice from me. I know, I literally know just enough to be dangerous, but that's a nice little cheat sheet, and I carry one of those with me all the time when somebody asks me, well, what tax bracket do you think I'm going to be in, or this or that or the other. Most often I refer to those when somebody's trying to decide if they still qualify to put money into an IRA or a Roth or something. Do they make too much money or whatever? But it's a good thing to have. Now this thing here, I don't know, yours probably isn't in color. It says Economic Indicators Dashboard. This is a neat little piece, and I'll tell you, you can get this. This is updated about twice a month. And may I see one of these? Okay. If you look at your shading, there's a bar that goes all the way across for each of 8 economic indicators. The bar that goes clear across represents the entire history of that economic indicator, the biggest to the smallest measurement. And then the shaded part, which is a subset of that, in my case it's blue, that represents the typical range of that. For example, you look at let's go down to home prices, the 4th one down. So the typical range is right here, but here's what the extremes have been. And then there's a little box with a little pointer on it, and that's where this indicator was on August 9th when this was printed or created. And the most important, in my opinion, the most important feature of this is that little arrow that's pointing either left or right. That is the trend. That's where it is trending. And what I like to see them all pointing toward the middle of the bar, the middle blue bar in my case, because that means it's normal. And I like economic indicators to be normal. But anyway, you can go to a website, and it has a wonderful name. It's called russellinvestments.com. It's not me. It's a money management firm in Seattle, Washington that just happens to have this wonderful name. But go to russellinvestments.com and poke around a little bit and look for the Economic Indicators Dashboard, and they publish that. You don't even have to have a login ID. You just go to their website and you can get this as often as you want. And actually this thing has 14 pages. But this is the first page. It's kind of the executive summary, and this is all I ever use. So that a little tidbit for you. And finally, these are 2 pages. You've got a series of 7 questions, and then you have a scorecard. I don't want you to do this right now, although some of you were probably doing it while I was talking just to ease the pain of the boredom. But when you get a chance, when you get home or whatever, go through this little questionnaire and answer these things, quickly and honestly. Plug your answers into this, and well, if you do this and then somebody comes up to you and says, I just spent $2,000 on a financial plan. Do you have a financial plan? You can say, yes, I do. Because even though it's terribly simplistic, it is a financial plan. And if you don't have anything, once you've done this, you've taken a step toward planning. Since I'm a financial planner, I like to see people do that. I really appreciate your kind attention. Let's see, perfect. I wanted to go 45 minutes and then have time for questions. Is that okay?
That's perfect, yes.
Okay, so are there any questions? Not just about what I talked about, but about anything that you think a financial advisor would know. We'll call this Stump the Chump. ask me something and you might have the pleasure of seeing my face just go blank. Yes, ma'am. Go, let her hand you the microphone.
Is there anywhere that you can look at the financial planners and get a rating or decide like if somebody's a good planner or not?
Yes, at least as far as CFPs, Certified Financial Planners go, you can go to the, my own organization, and I don't remember what the website is. I don't go there very often. If you just do a search on Certified Financial Planners, you'll get to, there's one called the Registry, and you can go on there and probably find little old me, and it will tell you things like how many years they've been in the business. It might even tell you how many millions of dollars they have under management. It will tell you about any ways in which they've gotten crosswise with regulatory agencies. You might even find that their certified financial planner designation has been revoked, in which case you probably shouldn't do business with them. Not that there are a lot of people in my business that are not certified financial planners that do a really, really good job, and there's other designations as well. So CFPs are not the only experts, but you should check anybody out. And if they have a designation after their name like CFP or CHFC or CLU or CFA, there's just, the C usually stands for certified. CI, certified idiot. But if they have letters after their name, there's somewhere there's a regulatory agency or a professional association that keeps track of them and makes sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And last I checked, where's some wood? Last I checked, there's no black marks on my record. Last I checked. You just never know. I mean, you know, who might be planning to serve you. Anything else? Yes, sir.
ICL is 5% interest business. Where do you get 5%?
Well, that's a very good question. In the financial planning world, you know, we kind of have to have a starting point for what we can not necessarily promise people, but what we can plan on getting. And it's largely based on what interest rates are doing, but the interest rates, like you get down at the bank, are at the very low end. And if a CD, a one-year CD is, what is it paying right now? 2%? Not even that high? 1.5. Okay, 1.5. I figured it was between 1 and 2. So if a one-year CD at the bank's getting 1 to 2%, there are other places where you can, for example, if you go to an insurance company and buy just a simple annuity, you're probably going to get 2 to 3%. And then there's all kinds of bond investments, mutual funds and such, that you can get all the way up to like 7 or 8% right now, but the higher percentage you get, the more risky the bonds are. So the safest bonds are the ones that are going to be yielding the least. And even if they're safe bonds, like AAA rated, because bonds and bond funds, the bonds that are inside of them, are rated by a rating system, and the best is AAA. It goes AAA, AA, single A, triple B, double B, single B, triple C, double C, single C. Stay away, okay? The top 4 grades are what we call investment grades. Those are the ones that the Federal Reserve will allow banks to invest their depositors' money in. That's AAA, AA, single A, and triple B. Then you've got double B and single B that's right under there, and that's the beginnings of what some people call junk bonds, but I prefer to call them high yield bonds. And I really love double B and single B. And then you get down to triple C, now you're starting to get into things that are really pretty risky, but they're yielding pretty high right now. Anything below triple C, you know, I'm not smart enough to use it, but anyway, that, what you can get on the 10-year Treasury bill, which right now is 3%, just under 3%. All these different kinds of ways of making income. The smart people that I listen to, they extrapolate what they think we can, I hate to use the word promise because we don't ever make promises, but we can feel strongly that you'll be able to do that in terms of generating income without eating into your principal.
If you tie up your money for a long time,
Hang on.
if you give somebody your money for a long time, because when you go to a bank or something, usually there's a one year CD that's 0.0. But if you tie it up for 5 to 10 years, you can get up to 3 or 4 and 9.
Right. So what he said, in case you didn't hear, he's saying that the longer you tie up your money with a CD and other things for that matter, the higher yield they're going to give you, because they want your money locked up for as long as they can, because once again, they're in the honorable business of taking your money and renting it from you. That's what interest is it's rent. They're saying, give me that $100,000 and I'll pay you 4% a year rent. Meanwhile, I'm going to take that money now and I'm going to go over here and give it to my investment department, and they're going to double that or maybe even triple that in the same period of time. And then when the time comes, we promise to give you your money back. We'll give you your money back, and you got all the interest as well. And we kept what we grew with it. It's like the parable of the talents. Really. I mean, investing, I've actually had fellow Christians tell me, oh, I would never invest in the stock market because that's gambling and the Bible is against gambling. And I say, well, how do you explain the parable of the talents? Do you think that in ancient Palestine, do you think there was FDIC? Do you think when the 5-talent man went out and invested his 5 talents that he was guaranteed to get the 5 back, let alone the growth? He took risks, and God rewarded him for that with lots of praise. Now, I realize the parable of talents is not just about money, but I think it's there for a reason. I think God is happy with us when we are willing to take prudent risks with some of our money in an effort to grow it for our future. I think that's a very good thing. Is that what you were getting at?
Yeah. If you tie up your money for a long time and you have to get it out, emergency, you lose it, right?
No, not necessarily. A lot of banks will waive the surrender penalties if for certain, like death or a real medical emergency or whatever. I mean, it used to be banks just couldn't wait to extract a penalty for early withdrawal. I remember there was a commercial for some bank about 30 years ago, and it was on the radio, and it says, we're offering such and such on our CDs and blah, 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 blah. And they went on and on and on, and then they said, so call such and such. And then the voice comes on and says, blah, 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 penalty for early withdrawal. And in the background you heard this, ouch! Somebody got the lash because they pulled their money out early. You don't look like you feel very well.
I'm good. I'm good.
Oh,
Thanks. I'm
fine. Everything's
I
good.
really am good. I'm good. Okay. I do think Russell made a good point, though, that whether it's your finances or your home, if you're looking into a reverse mortgage, be sure that you have the value, that they give you the correct value, that you're with a company that is respectable in that realm, right? Do your due diligence, because you can't take it with you, but God knows you need it while you're here, right? There's no one who's living on air either. And that includes, how you invest your time, how you invest your gifts that God has given you, being the gifts that He's equipped you with in ministry or whatever it may be. He always multiplies. He always Well, I mean, the Bible is full of this, folks, and I don't want to get into prosperity gospel because that's a whole different thing, and I would never ever preach that, and the roof would fall in on me first, I would hope, because I'm not saying that if you believe it, then you're going to have $1 million instantly for retirement. That's not what I mean. But Russell is very true that the good stewards, the people who are responsible and think things out, not just with their finances, but with all that they have and all that they are rewarded. God multiplies. He's incredible at doing that. In my own experience, my husband refused to tithe, refused when we first married. He said, you can tithe what you make. I know you do that. It's not for me. And we ended up in bankruptcy when our daughters were very little. Gosh, such a long time ago now. And in bankruptcy, my husband said, I have to tithe. And we were out of the financial score for bankruptcy in 3 years when it's supposed to take 7. And we have never been in trouble since. God knows what he's doing. We just have to trust him with that. So I think you're right. So sorry, I had a soapbox, so I jumped right on it and preached, didn't I?
If there's no other questions, and got one more, or not one more. You ask. I'll stay until you're exhausted.
How many, or what percentage of 20-something individuals have a financial plan?
What was, how many of what individuals?
What percentage of 20-something
20-something?
individuals have a financial plan?
Maybe half. I mean, look, people in their 20s.
They're the ones that need it.
I know, and I am so proud of my own daughters, probably because they've just listened to it their whole little lives. But when they got their first job, and my son, the first thing they asked me was, would you look at, they've got this 401k plan, would you tell me how to fill this out? Because that is extremely unusual. I mean, let's face it, when I was 20 years old, well, actually, that's not a good example. Most people in their 20s are not, first of all, they think they're going to be 20 forever. I know I did. I never dreamed that I would actually get old. But they're sure not thinking about the future, at least not in terms of money and financial well-being. The average age where a person starts to take their financial future seriously is 45. And the average, and that right around there is the average age at which workers start contributing to their 401k plan, even if they had it from the first day they were employed. And you would be amazed at how high the percentage is of people working like at Spirit or, companies with really big, good 401k plans, that they don't even contribute the part that the company matches. And if you ask them why not, they'll say, they'll figure out some way to take it from me, or that's just a big scam, or whatever. And I think, oh, man.
And they lose all of those years of growth.
Yeah, that's called opportunity cost. They've lost the opportunity forever. And when we talk about the 3 T's and the M, time, when you're investing, how old are you? That's time. How do you handle risk? That's temperament. Time, temperament. Do you have any training, or do you need to go to somebody who knows how to invest? Training. And then M is for money. You got to have money to invest, but not necessarily that much. And the vast amount of people, the biggest asset they ever had in their lives was time. And we've all seen the compound where one person starts at age 20 and they put so much away for 10 years and then they stop. They never contribute another dime, and then someone else starts at that age and contribute for the rest of their working lives. The person who put it away the first 10 years, the same amount every year. At the end, theirs is like this and the other person might be like that. because, you know, it's, as Benjamin Franklin said, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. And it's true. It is just amazing. So time is the biggest asset anybody has. So if you can teach your grandkids or your kids or your great-grandkids to put even $50 a month away, and you know, if you go out to eat at a nice restaurant, you're not going to get out of there for less than $50. So give up one nice restaurant a month for your future, and your employer will probably match it with another $50.
This might be more in your opinion instead of what's better. But people who younger people who want to get out of debt, they want to pay their mortgage off before they are contributing something to their 401, but you run the numbers, and at the end, pay your mortgage off over time and compound that investment over the same period of time. What's your thoughts on one versus the other?
Well, I like the idea. I mean, if they have, let's say they have at the end of the month they have an extra $500 that they can afford to put into something. My first impulse is always split it in half, put $250 into the investment, and pay $250 on the principal of your mortgage. But with the new tax law, we still have the mortgage interest deduction, but most people, because of the doubling of the standard deduction, are not going to be able to use it. A lot of people are not going to be able to use it. So that tells me maybe you go ahead and steer more money toward the mortgage now because you're not getting that tax break.
But if you're looking at age 65, one thing I tell my kids, you cannot save too much. You cannot save too much.
Well, this is what I tell everybody. I don't care how old they are, you know. God does not give us the next moment, let alone tomorrow. So don't eat, and I love peanut butter, but don't eat peanut butter sandwiches 3 times a day just so you can contribute a few extra bucks to your retirement plan. Yeah, you got to live life. You got balance. You got to find balance.
Well, I didn't mean for it to sound quite like that. The thing is, don't neglect it.
No.
When you have an option to do something, go get it.
Contribute the match in your 401k. If your employer matches the first 3%, then figure out a way to give them 3%. And it doesn't even cost you 3% in take home because that's before tax dollars, before they've taken out FICA and Social Security and taxes and all this. So it's only going to cost you maybe 2% of your take home pay. As you can see, sometimes I actually come up with a little passion about this subject even after all these years. Yeah, that's how I get out of bed in the morning.
Something else that comes to mind in dealing with my mom is remember that there's going to come a time when looking at all these numbers makes no sense to you. And so be sure to have someone in your life, whether it be one of your kids or a neighbor or a financial planner or someone that it does make sense to. I love my brother. He's actually one of the most intelligent people you will ever meet, but he is terrible with money. Terrible. And so it's actually my husband who is the best advisor for my mom and for us right now. He's very good with that stuff. Find someone you can trust because, again, don't depend on being able to stay in your own home and take care of yourself and pay all your own bills forever. We are living longer, and so that is happening less regularly. And I don't mean that as a downer. I just want to be honest with you so that you can have the best care, the very, very best. I want you all to have the very best care you can. And if I could, I would take care of all of you myself.
I'm going to add to what she just said by saying, whoever that person is, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's one of your kids, maybe it's just a friend, let that the institutions that have, the investment institutions or the banks or whatever, just put it in writing that you're not giving this person permission to take any money or anything out. You're giving them permission to get information. Suppose something happened to you and you were like in a car wreck and you were in a coma, and the hospital, needed to know kind of whether you're going to be able to pay for some of this stuff or not. You need someone who can, let me tell you, if somebody calls my office and they want information about one of my client's accounts and it's not the client and their name isn't on the account in any way, it's not like joint tenants or anything, it's just in the client's name, even if I know it's their husband or their son, I cannot legally give them any information unless I have something in writing signed by the client naming them as the designated person. And that's one of the practices that we do in my practice, is that every time we meet with clients, either we have them sign that, name someone and sign the form and we put it in their file, or we ask them, do you still want this person to be that person? Because sometimes things change. Well, my son just became a meth head. I think I should get someone else. Unfortunately, I wish I was joking. So have at least one person in this world that can get information on your accounts and give it to the appropriate people.
And the spouse thing doesn't hold anymore because there are so many divorces, right? And so someone walks in and they don't know that you've been divorced and they give the wrong information to who's supposedly your spouse, and then they're sued. So they will not do it anymore. Like my husband and I have a joint account, but we have to have each other on our paperwork or they will not tell him anything and they won't tell me anything. It's just the way it goes. So that's, thank you for mentioning that.
It's just the times we live in.
Are there any other questions this evening? Anyone we missed? I do want to encourage you, this is the last one of these, but Zone is coming up. Be looking into that. We're going to have stuff published this Sunday about what's going to be happening on Wednesday nights here at the church starting September 12th. And then if you have missed one of these and you want to get a hold of the tape that Daryl has been making, we do have them uploading online at the church website. Or if you, because I know not everybody has a computer. My mom thinks that they're evil and won't even turn one on, so I get that. We do have hard copy DVDs that I'm going to get to Deb Derber, and they're going to be in the library, and you check them out like anything else so we know who's taking it and who to get it back from. But we can pass those DVDs around as much as you need as well. So if there's something that you missed, please don't hesitate to get a hold of one of those. So again, you all have been fantastic, and you made it a really blessed summer, and I hope you have a blessed fall. Thanks very much.